Good afternoon, everyone. Had a good lunch? So all that food is in your intestines, all the blood is going to your intestines and away from your head, and now you're in the perfect frame of mind to hear some more talks, right? All the tryptophan going to your brain. Really, we do have something a treat in store for you. One of the things that I've learned about the government is, they don't come to you, you come to them. But if you come to them, then they will come to you, because you have to be here in D.C. And that's why we do this in D.C. so that we can get the government speakers, because that's their guidelines in which they have to operate. But then you really get to interact with people from the government, and there are some really cool people from the government. One of them, who I've known for many years, is Aldo Badano from the FDA. Did he step out? Right there. Okay, wait. I mean, there's and Aldo. Is from the FDA and deals with many years about the issues of image displays and the quality, and is someone I've had a lot of great conversations with over the years, and I had the privilege of visiting his lab back in, I think it was May, and seeing how they look at things literally, and he's going to talk to us on image quality and handheld image viewing devices, physical characterization, and perceptual limits. They do a lot of work, basically, just to couch this, to recognize, doctors frequently are champions of new technology, and they say, hey, this is great, oh, this is cool, I got to use this, yeah, but what about the patient? Is this safe? And that's the FDA's job, is to say, we appreciate your enthusiasm, doctor, and yes, you should innovate and use new technologies, but let's make sure that you're not doing it at the expense of patient care. I asked my daughter, who's 12 years old, I said, would you like me to read your chest X-ray off an iPad? She said, oh, that's really cool. I said, what if I misdiagnose you? Oh, that's not cool. So, all right, so with that, I give you Aldo Badano.
Thank you, Dr. Hirschhorn. For those of you who are wondering about this, this is not because of internal battles in FDA talking about ways to clear devices. It was a soccer injury, but I'm confident that the image informatics guys at ACR can Photoshop this out of the video. So, I'm in the Division of Imaging and Applied Math, Office of Science and Engineering Lab. So this office is the research arm of the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, and I'm the lab leader for imaging physics. So we do a number of things related to imaging. And during the last 3 years or so, I've been involved in trying to understand these handheld image viewers and help FDA regulate and help sponsors also get through FDA in terms of the first applications that were cleared in last year. Disclosures, I have equipment loans, and I have research agreements with 2 companies, and the usual statement about commercial products. The data I'm going to show comes from a number of people in my lab, mostly students, local and non-local universities that are working in this topic. And here's my outline. I'm going to talk about some background regulatory remarks. Although I'm not in the regulatory office, I do represent FDA here. So, but my forte, I think, it's in the research side, and I'll be spending most of the time there. And finally, some words about standards. So here's a slide that I used in a couple of weeks ago in a presentation internally at FDA, and I thought I would share this with you, although it took me about an hour to go through it, this on single slide. So I'm going to do the fast version, and I'm going to focus on the handheld problem. You'll see the timeline of medical display, particularly from an FDA perspective, started somewhere in 95, and you'll see that it goes all the way to 2015. So we're doing perhaps some predictions. It started with the CRT, 5-megapixel CRT. I apologize for those who cannot actually read or see the small icons. In 99, we had LCDs and so on, 9-megapixel LCD, tiled system, projection systems for radiology. And then in 2006, in my opinion, I think we heard the first time rumors, I guess, that people were interested in using handhelds for reading. The first rumors I heard were not from the US, were from Japan, where most of the handheld technology actually comes to market faster. About the same time, industry also proposed flexible displays, although that has not materialized in terms of having flexible portable displays yet, but I think it will. And then in 2010, we had the Retina display, which I think was a landmark event in the medical display timeline. We're all familiar with that. I can come back if there's a need. In terms of standards and recommendations, we only have two pieces. First, the TG18 report, at least in terms of our FDA perspective. Of course, there's ACR recommendations, but that, as I'm sure you know, it's relate to the practice of medicine and the professional recommendations, not in terms of the regulatory aspects of this. So TG18, I think people working on display are familiar with this. It's an AAPM task group report. And then the first international standard, which is an IEC standard in 2009. And what were the FDA events? I hope you can read this, because I'm just going to go all the way to the red one, which points to the first app cleared for reading medical images in handheld devices. And that's what we are going to talk about today. So let me postulate that the big challenge for FDA regulatory path, if you want, in terms of displays particularly, is the fact that more and more we're using consumer-grade device. All of you have some kind of a consumer-grade device, and I was just sitting on a table with a radiologist who's picked it up and read a case right there, right? So not using medical-grade displays, but consumer-grade displays, and I think that is an important change in terms of the regulatory aspects of this. And if this word, I believe it doesn't exist, but if it were a word, it would, the definition would be something like the trend to replace dedicated, designed-for-purpose medical display devices with consumer-grade, entertainment-geared display products. And you will see that definition in the upcoming dictionary in 2015. This is very important for us. It's kind of a change in the way we look at devices at FDA. We're faced with a number of challenges because of this, and I'm going to point to some of those as I go through the slides. So we know that we have apps cleared for reading some medical images, some modalities, not all. And if you look at the IFU, the indication for use in the FDA website, you will see that those apps are cleared not for your primary device, but for circumstances where you don't have access to a workstation, but you feel that you have to read a case or read an image, and then that's where the apps are useful. However, looking forward, what we need at FDA is, I think in the community actually, not at FDA, is understand under what circumstances the sponsors or the industry is relieved from providing bench test data for new apps on known devices. So say tomorrow there's a new iPhone that will come up, and what is the regulatory pathway for an app that was clear for iPhone 5? What type of tests the industry needs to provide? That's still something that we have not defined our thinking about in this topic. And then the other thing is, what other factors of device performance are critical for demanding modalities? Particularly, some modalities are not yet cleared for interpretation in a handheld device, for instance, mammography. And then what are the characteristics? At what point are we going to say, okay, this display is good enough for mammography? And so I'll talk about some of that in the next slides. Our lab is focuses on comparing image quality across a variety of technologies and measuring image quality, not only in the laboratory where everything is nice, clean, and controllable, but rather in use conditions, like in this type of rooms, or if you're in a bus or in a metro. train, and what's the implication in terms of image quality. The first topic I want to point to is, can we use visual tests for real-time QC? And in the discussion we had just a few minutes ago, one of the things that became evident is how can you, when you're in a workstation, you know that there's a, hopefully you know that the display's been calibrated or checked, say every week, every month, every year. That's up to you. But in a handheld device, how can you check? Can you do QC on it, given that the ambient illumination is changing and actually the viewing angle is changing and the distance is changing, everything's changing. So how can you do that? And sponsors and academics have proposed that to do visual tests, because of course you will not be able, although it would be ideal, you will not be able to carry an illuminance meter and with your iPhone and say, okay, here I can read this image, oh, the sun came out, I have to move, and with your instrument. So can you do this with a visual task? And the answer is perhaps. So what we did in the lab is to compare two techniques. And I'm not going to go into details. I have the reference here, and I believe the slides will be on the web. Two techniques. One, the staircase technique, which takes about 120 seconds, clearly non-practical. No one's going to do it. If every time you have to read an image, you have to go through 120 seconds of tests. We compare this technique to what we call the node technique, which is the detection of noisy text, which is basically like a CAPTCHA approach to detection. You can see here on the right image that there's 4 characters, and you have to punch in the right 4 characters, and if you do, you can proceed. If not, you have to move to a improved environment. And what we can conclude from this is that even though the results are not identical, they're consistent. And so that is promising. So maybe we could use a really quick test, and actually some of the companies that are selling these apps clear through FDA are using a visual test to check for the ambient illumination condition. Ambient illumination condition is important because of display reflections, and so we do have ways of measuring display reflections. On the left top, you have the diffuse arrangement, which basically is a white box with the handheld inside and a diffuse illumination source. And the specular in the bottom, the specular setup, which is basically very, very straightforward. You come in at an angle and you measure the outgoing angle. And what we've shown here on the plot is that these are the 5 megapixel and 3 megapixel medical LCDs, and you can see here I have the diffuse coefficient on the y-axis and the specular coefficient on the x-axis. So very low specular, low diffuse, okay? And now I'm going to show you what is the reality for some of these mobile technologies, and you could see that they have, first of all, they are all much higher in specular. But in terms of diffuse coefficient, there's some technologies that have more and some technologies that have less. So not all handhelds are the same. Particularly this one seems to be very reflective in both specular and diffuse modes. On the other side, you could find some devices that actually are less reflectance in terms of diffuse, and that is important as well. So what we did next is we went and using this noisy text detection test to correlate the bench test with real-world performance, comparing these two devices, and this is Peter doing some of the experiments. And what we've shown is that on the y-axis you have the percent correct, so the times you picked up the 4 characters properly or appropriately, and then on the x-axis is the luminance. And we cover a large range, so 1 lux, probably here there's about 5 lux, depending on where you are. And some of these measurements, we had to wait until there was a very, very sunny day outside to go out and do these measurements. And what we found is that device A, which is better technology in terms of reflections, worse technology in terms of reflections, actually suffers more from illuminance than device B. So this is saying that, okay, not all devices are the same in terms of the effect of ambient illumination. We postulate that we can actually do a linear fit here and say, okay, I'm going to say, okay, I can support, or I can live with 10% reduction in my performance, whatever that is. And so you can go to this model and say, okay, I can read up to, say, 1,000 lux. So as long as the illuminance is 1,000 lux or less, I'm fine. So that would be a useful model. However, what we've found is that, and I'm not going to go into the details, really, the linear model doesn't fit, and we're working on, it doesn't fit well, and we're working on something that's a little bit more sophisticated than a linear model. But certainly, they're all negatively correlated. So the more lux, the more illuminance, the worse the performance. That's demonstrated here. The other thing I want to show you today, and this has been, I think it's the first time that people will be able to see this, is that we also do resolution and noise measurements, which is important for imaging. We have a variety of CCD cameras, and we can put all these devices and measure lines. For instance, here I'm showing 5 devices and horizontal and vertical lines going through them. And you can see that they don't, first of all, they don't look like a line. They're a combination of different lines and spots and things like that. Of course, these are magnified images, right? But they're very different in terms of the way they represent a line. And that allows us to measure MTF, which is the modulation transfer function, which is the Fourier transform of the line spread function. Just to give you an idea, for those of you who are not that familiar with it, a perfect display would have an MTF of 1 solid at all spatial frequencies. So that would be a perfect display. Actually, film, radiographic film, is probably very, very high here as a very perfect display. It's not electronic, but it's very good in terms of resolution. So what you can see here is that there are clear differences between these technologies in terms of the resolution. For instance, this red line here is a conventional cheap monitor, if you want. And then some of these are the latest versions of the Galaxy products with a new technology in the panel that actually achieve higher resolution, and that's quite important when we compare devices. This is for the horizontal in the top, and the vertical, I think the story is similar. And then I want to show the noise. It's a very busy set of plots, but I wanted just to show you that these devices are typically lower noise across the frequency range compared to conventional LCD monitors, which is something that is very useful. And no one has actually measured that before. So it's very, I think it's a hopeful result in the sense that these technologies, not designed for medical imaging, in fact have some properties that are useful for interpreting radiological images. I'm going to skip this. I will mention that not only we're concerned at FDA with the handheld problem, but also the application of the handheld problem to pathology. We've seen some reports also that, for instance, the tablet size devices are being postulated as perhaps good platforms for reading pathology images, whole slide imager type of images. And so then it's not about the grayscale only, so you have the color on top of it. And so we are trying to understand how to do that problem at FDA as well. I'm just going to skip this because I want to spend more time in other aspects and have time for questions. So the last piece of this is some of the recommendations and standards. And I want to point out 2 articles that we published last year. For those of you who are interested in reading a little bit more about this, this is at a level where I think you don't have to be a display physicist to understand. Two articles that we published, one on terms of emerging topics in medical displays and another one in terms of what type of tests you would do. I know that there are some industry representatives in the audience, so this would be very useful, I think, to you. If you're planning on an FDA submission for a display, this is current thinking. It's not guidance, but it's current thinking in terms of the tests and the information that we would like to see in an application. For FFDM, for mobile displays, for true color modalities, and also for 3D displays. We've started to think about real 3D stereo displays for medical. So I encourage you to, if that's what you are after, to go to these papers and communicate with me later on this topic. And then finally, I have a an advertisement, if you want. I'm the convener of an international standards committee on display quality or medical displays. And we would really like to have participation from the ACR, either formally or informally. You don't have to necessarily go to all the meetings, but I think having someone in the committee would be very useful. This particular committee is the one responsible for putting out the first international standard on medical displays. It's going, right now it's a maintenance team, which means that it's being revised, and it will be a second edition in about four years or so. And so we're working on topics that include handheld devices, but also color and other aspects of display quality. So if you're interested in participating, it's mostly industry representative. So if there's someone in here from the industry community that wants to participate, please talk to me. There's also another group in the AAPM domain that is working on displays, and that is also open to ACR formal or informal representatives. Right now we're focusing on color, but there's an intention to go to other topics as well, including handheld. So, and this is what I'm saying here. I would encourage you to think about participating in some way or another in these efforts. I guess that's the end, and the slides will be on the web, so some of these references you can look it up, and I left some time for questions.
Got some questions? You want to take it over? Go ahead.
When the FDA is evaluating a new application for approval, how much are they evaluating the device, and how much are they evaluating the software?
Excellent question. It depends. I'm going to answer that in the constraints of the handheld image viewer case. So it's a combination. We do look at both. There's a review procedure for software, which is fairly conventional. There's some things that are unique to the mobile class of software, and I would refer you to a guidance document that's pretty general, but it has some pointers in terms of the software piece. That's the general mobile device guidance. I can give you the link later on. And then in terms of the device, we do look, because this is an interaction between the two, unfortunately. It would be nice if it was just the software, but the same, you have the same thing in workstations, right? You have a software and then you have a device. However, in mobile, it's more important, in my opinion, to have this connection between the software and the hardware. For instance, if you are bringing images into a mobile phone and that image comes with some information about how to display it, which is considered typically software component, but then you have to display it in a particular device that has some capabilities in terms of the grayscale or color or resolution, also a number of pixels, then you need to be able to do that handshaking in a manner that is optimal or close to optimal, because otherwise the process of displaying the image is not appropriate, right? So the display might have a calibration or might not have a calibration, and how you incorporate that, that's a software piece as well. Displays have always had these two components. Even the first 5 megapixel CRT that was cleared by FDA in 2009, 7. That device had a software component, and the calibration component was a software component. It was part of the device. So that's where I think it's both. The question really that I wanted to emphasize is that in mobile, I think we'll see a much faster evolution of devices, right? You can have a software app that is compatible with hundreds of devices, eventually, perhaps, if you have a Droid app. And these are all very different. Some of the devices that I showed here, I didn't have the let me see if I can go back really quickly. Yeah. So some of these devices you will recognize which ones are Droid and which ones are Apple products, but they're very, in 1 year you can have 3-4 different versions of these products, right? And they are different. They are significantly different in the hardware. So how do you incorporate that in your software? So it has to be a combined review, I think, combined analysis. And that is challenging. So what we're trying to think is, how can we relax that and say, okay, for these devices that we are familiar with, we are just not going to request the manufacturers to provide additional data because we have some experience. But that would take, I think it would take a few submissions. The same thing happens with all devices. Once we see 10, the number 11 is usually much easier because we are familiar with the technology in some way or another. We are familiar with the process. We have some background from the field in terms of the use and misuse and things like that. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Any other questions? I have a quick question. When you looked at the modulation transfer function, the ability to display high spatial frequencies of iPad, did you look at the iPad 2 or the iPad 3? iPad 3 is a 3 megapixel display.
This is the first generation iPad.
Saying the 3 megapixel is way tinier pixels.
Yeah.
Probably,
Yeah.
probably
And what
would
you
sit high up there on.
What you see here is the Nyquist frequency. So this is the highest frequency that the device can actually provide to you. And so you can see the iPad is right here, kind of second after the display. And that's because it's the first generation. I think the latest generation will be very close to the upper end of the frequencies.
Terrific. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.